Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be tackling a topic that I think is relevant to pretty much everyone, emotions in the workplace.
Yeah, it really is.
We're going to be looking at how our feelings impact our work lives, from like those little individual moments of frustration
Mhm.
to like the overall vibe of a whole company. And our guide for this deep dive is an academic paper
Yep.
called Emotions in the Workplace, published in the Annual Review of Organizational Psychology and Organizational Behavior.
Catchy title.
It is catchy, but also
Sounds very academic.
it does sound very academic, but I promise you it's way more interesting than it sounds.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating.
So before we get into the really juicy stuff,
Yeah.
I think we need to start with a really fundamental question.
Okay.
What is an emotion?
Right.
Seems simple, right?
You would think, right?
But it's actually a bit of a brain teaser.
It really is.
Hmm.
It's funny how something we all experience, like so intensely, is so hard to actually define.
Yeah.
There's no one definition that everyone in the field agrees on. And there's this classic thought experiment called the Gmeesian problem
Oh, yeah.
that really highlights this complexity.
Is that the one about running from a bear?
That's the one.
That one always makes me question everything.
It poses this question, like,
Mhm.
does seeing a bear cause the fear that makes us run? Or does the act of running itself create that feeling of fear?
Oh, interesting.
Like, which comes first, right?
Right.
The chicken or the egg?
Yeah, so it's like not a simple cause and effect.
Yeah.
It's more like this tangled web of
Right.
brain activity and
Physical response.
bodily responses.
Yeah.
Right?
And the modern understanding is that emotions and cognition
Okay.
arise from all these neural processes working together, shaped by evolution to help us, survive,
To survive, right? To
Yeah.
keep us safe.
keep us safe.
But that also makes studying emotions seem extra tricky,
Absolutely.
especially when we throw in workplace on top of that.
Right.
How do researchers even begin to untangle all of this?
Well, one of the first challenges is just being clear about what we're even talking about.
Okay.
Because you have terms like emotion, affect, mood, and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
They often get used interchangeably.
Right.
And that can kind of muddy the waters when you're trying to study something.
It's like trying to bake a cake,
Okay.
but sometimes using salt instead of sugar.
Yeah.
You might end up with something, but it's not going to be what you expected.
Exactly. And that's why researchers have developed these frameworks to try to categorize and define what we mean by emotion.
Okay.
There's one, for example, by Mulligan and Scherer, where they propose 7 criteria
Wow, 7.
that something needs to meet to be classified as an emotion.
Okay.
And so that helps researchers be more precise.
7 criteria. That already tells me that emotions are way more complex
Sure.
than we probably realize.
Absolutely.
But how did we even get to a point where we're dissecting emotions at work? Was this always a thing?
It wasn't always a thing. The field has evolved a lot over time. So right after World War II, research mainly focused on job satisfaction.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But things started to shift in the 1980s with the rise of this concept of emotional labor.
Ah, emotional labor. I feel like anyone who's worked a customer service job
Enough.
knows exactly what that means. Plastering on a smile even when you're feeling the opposite of cheerful.
Exactly. And sociologist Arlie Hochschild
Okay.
really pioneered this concept.
Mm-hmm.
And she explored how certain jobs require employees to display specific emotions regardless of how they're actually feeling.
Right.
This led to this idea of display rules,
Okay.
which are basically unwritten guidelines about what emotions are appropriate to show at work.
It's like we're all actors in a way.
In a sense,
You know, putting on a performance to fit the expectations of the workplace.
And those display rules can vary a lot depending on the company culture and the industry, right?
Oh, for sure.
Think about the difference between like a high-energy sales environment
Totally.
and like a subdued library setting. Very different expectations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we go from studying just job satisfaction to recognizing this whole hidden world of emotional labor.
Right.
Then researchers needed a model to actually study this interplay of emotions.
Okay.
And that led to what's called affective events theory, or AET.
Okay, AET. So what is so special about this theory?
So AET recognizes that our emotions at work are not static.
Okay.
They change. They fluctuate throughout the day
Right.
based on all sorts of triggers.
Uh-huh.
So it proposes that everyday events at work, big or small,
Okay.
can trigger emotional responses in us, which then influence our behavior and performance.
So it's not just about like my general personality
Right.
or how happy I am with my job overall.
No, it's much more dynamic than that.
Yeah, it's about how I react in the moment to a frustrating email from a client or a surprise compliment from my boss.
Exactly, those micro-level
Yeah,
emotional shifts.
that makes a lot of sense. But how do researchers actually capture these fleeting emotions? Is this like mood journals or something?
It's kind of like that. It's called the experience sampling method,
Okay.
or ESM, and it's like taking snapshots of your emotions throughout the day.
Okay.
So participants will get prompted at random intervals to report on how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's happening around them.
So it's like a way to gather real-time data.
Real-time data
Yeah.
on how emotions are kind of ebbing and flowing in the workplace.
Yeah, and it's much more nuanced than just asking someone at the end of the day, so how was your day? How'd you feel?
Right, right, because so much can happen
Exactly.
over the course of a day.
Absolutely.
So it's like having a backstage pass
Ooh.
to the emotional world of work.
Yeah.
You see all the little costume changes, the quick pep talk,
The meltdowns.
the moments of doubt, the bursts of inspiration.
Yeah.
And that's so cool. But that's just one way to look at it, and that's more like the behavioral side of things.
Yeah.
So what about what's actually happening inside our brains
Yeah, so-
when we experience these emotions?
Huh.
Yeah, so that's where neuroscience tools like fMRI come into play.
Okay.
Functional magnetic resonance imaging.
Now we're getting really high tech.
Yeah.
Is this like seeing which parts of the brain light up when someone's feeling stressed versus excited?
That's exactly what it does.
Whoa.
It's amazing.
That's so...
By measuring blood flow in different regions of the brain, we can see which areas are more active
Okay.
during different emotional experiences.
So instead of relying solely on self-reported data like, oh, I felt stressed today,
Right.
we can actually see what's happening neurologically.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So from all these different approaches to measuring emotions at work, what are some of the key takeaways that have emerged?
I think one of the biggest findings, no matter how you measure it, is that emotions are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
They drive behavior at work.
Okay.
You know, they influence our decision-making, our relationships with colleagues, our motivation levels, our performance.
So emotions are not just these fluffy, intangible things that we should just ignore or try to suppress.
Definitely not.
They're actually a key part of how we show up at work
They're integral.
and how we function.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we don't always acknowledge.
I agree.
So the more we understand about the role they play, the better we can create workplaces that support both individuals
Yes.
and the organization as a whole.
I completely agree.
So all this research is great for academics.
Yeah.
But what about the average person just trying to navigate all the emotional ups and downs of work?
Right.
What are some practical takeaways?
That's the key question, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most important takeaways is that managing emotions is a skill
Okay.
that can be learned and developed, just like any other skill.
So we can train ourselves to be more aware of our emotions, understand them, and regulate them better.
Exactly. It takes practice, but there are lots of resources like books, workshops, even apps
Really?
that can help you build these skills.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
So what are some steps someone can take to kind of boost their EQ or their emotional intelligence?
One of the most fundamental steps is simply paying attention to your emotions.
Okay.
Just noticing how you feel throughout the day. What triggers certain emotions? How do they show up in your body? How do they impact your behavior?
It's like being a curious observer of yourself
Absolutely.
without judgment.
Just noticing.
Yeah.
And as you become more aware of your own emotions, you'll start to recognize patterns.
Okay.
And then you can get more control over how you respond.
That makes sense. What are some other tips?
Another helpful strategy is mindfulness.
Okay.
It involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right.
And it can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths,
Okay.
focusing on your breath, or noticing what you see and hear and smell around you.
Right. So it's about kind of hitting the pause button on that constant chatter in our minds.
Exactly. And grounding yourself in the here and now.
Okay.
Mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress, increase focus, and help us regulate our emotions.
So very helpful for the workplace.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about individuals. What about people in leadership positions? How can they use all this knowledge to create a positive work environment?
That's so important.
Yeah.
One of the best things leaders can do is model emotional intelligence themselves.
Leading by example.
Exactly. If leaders are open about their emotions, demonstrate empathy, and handle conflict constructively, it sets the tone for the whole team.
It's like they're giving permission to
Yes.
their team to be more authentic and emotionally aware.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and beyond that, they can implement policies and practices that support well-being.
Like what? Give me some examples.
One simple thing is just encouraging breaks.
Breaks, okay.
Yeah, we often push ourselves to work for hours and hours.
Oh, yeah.
But research shows that taking even short breaks can help us recharge, reduce stress, improve focus.
So instead of glorifying that always-on mentality, it's about creating a culture where it's okay to step away and take care of yourself.
Exactly. And that can be so important for people in jobs that require a lot of emotional labor,
Yeah, that makes sense.
like customer service.
Right, customer service, healthcare.
Exactly.
What are some other ways that leaders can support their team?
Another important step is providing opportunities for professional development,
Okay.
specifically around emotional intelligence.
Ugh.
So offering workshops on things like communication skills, conflict resolution, stress management.
So equipping people with tools.
Yes, giving them practical tools
Yeah.
to navigate the emotional challenges.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it doesn't have to be just formal training.
Right.
Leaders can also foster a culture of open communication,
Okay.
where it's safe for employees to express how they're feeling, ask for help when they need it, and get support from their colleagues.
That sounds like a dream workplace.
Right.
Where people actually feel heard and understood and valued.
Yeah.
Not just for their technical skills, but for who they are as people.
Exactly, their whole selves.
Yeah. And it sounds like the research suggests that when we create those kinds of emotionally intelligent workplaces, everyone benefits.
Everyone benefits.
That's awesome. This is giving me so much to think about in terms of my own work life and how I interact with my colleagues and manage my own team.
It's really powerful stuff.
It is. Are there any other big picture takeaways that you think are really important for people to grasp?
You know, one overarching theme that keeps coming up is that emotions are inherently social.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just something we experience internally. They're constantly being shaped by our interactions and the environment around us.
So we're not just isolated individuals battling our emotions alone.
No, we're all connected.
We're all in this together.
We are.
That makes me think about that concept of emotional contagion
Absolutely.
that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
If we're all influencing each other's emotions, then it becomes even more important to create a positive and supportive emotional environment.
It's crucial.
And we can all contribute to that,
We can.
regardless of our role in the organization.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this has really opened my eyes to just how important emotions are at work. But I have to ask, with all this talk about measuring them and managing them, isn't there a risk of things getting a little too, I don't know, clinical?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that even though we can use all these tools and techniques
Right.
to understand and manage emotions better, we don't want to create a workplace where people feel like they're constantly being monitored.
Right, or scrutinized.
Exactly.
Like we're walking on eggshells,
Yes.
afraid to express anything less than perfect positivity.
It shouldn't feel inauthentic.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's about
Sure.
finding that balance between acknowledging how important emotions are
Mm-hmm.
and creating a space where people feel safe and respected no matter how they're feeling.
So it's not about stifling emotions.
Yeah.
It's about creating an emotionally intelligent workplace where people can express themselves authentically. Within reasonable boundaries, of course.
Of course, yeah.
So it's about approaching all this with a sense of curiosity and compassion.
I love that, yeah.
Being open to understanding our own emotions and those of others
Mm-hmm.
without judgment,
Without judgment.
without pressure to fix anything.
Exactly.
So I guess it's about recognizing that emotions are a natural part of being human.
They are.
And when we embrace them,
Yes.
both the good and the bad,
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
yeah, we create a much richer and
Mm.
more fulfilling work experience for everyone.
I think so.
Okay, this has been so insightful.
It's been a great conversation.
And I feel like we've covered so much, but I'm curious if there was anything else from the research that really stood out to you.
Yeah, there was one thing that I keep thinking about,
Okay.
which is the discussion of how we perceive emotions in others,
Okay.
especially across cultures.
Right, those emotional dialects
Exactly.
that we were talking about earlier.
It's amazing how something like a smile can have such different meanings,
Right.
depending on where you are in the world.
And who you're interacting with.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the research shows that these variations can really impact communication
Right.
and collaboration in the workplace.
Yeah, I can imagine all sorts of misunderstandings happening.
Absolutely.
Like mistaking someone's excitement for anger or misinterpreting a subtle facial expression.
Sure.
Yeah.
And those misinterpretations can lead to all sorts of problems, damaged relationships,
Oh, yeah.
missed opportunities.
Right.
It really highlights the importance of not jumping to conclusions
Right.
and being mindful that our own cultural lens might be shaping how we're reading a situation.
Yeah, so it's about approaching those cross-cultural interactions with a lot of curiosity
Yes.
and humility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess on a broader level,
Yeah.
it just really underscores the importance of fostering a workplace culture that values diversity and inclusivity,
I agree.
not just in terms of demographics,
Right.
but in terms of how we understand and express emotions.
That's so important.
So creating a space where people can truly be themselves,
Mhm.
express their emotions authentically,
Yeah.
and knowing that their unique perspectives
Yes.
and emotional expressions
Yes.
are valued.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great workplace.
It does.
Yeah.
So when we create that kind of environment,
Yeah.
we unlock the full potential
Yeah.
of every person and of the team as a whole.
Absolutely.
Wow, this deep dive has truly been a journey.
It has.
We've gone from defining what an emotion even is
Right.
to understanding how they operate at all these different levels, from individuals
Yeah.
to teams to organizations.
Absolutely.
We've talked about strategies for managing emotions,
Yes.
the importance of a healthy emotional climate.
Mm-hmm.
We even touched on the ethical considerations.
Yes, those are so
Both
important.
emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
And we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's still so much more to learn.
So much.
And the research is always evolving.
Absolutely.
It's exciting to think about the future of this field and how this knowledge can change the way we work and relate to each other.
Absolutely.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for guiding us through this really fascinating topic.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I always love talking about this stuff.
I can tell.
It's so interesting.
It is. And to our listener, we hope this has given you some valuable insights into the world of emotions at work.
Yes.
And we hope that you feel inspired to keep exploring this fascinating topic.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember your emotions are a source of power, not a problem to be solved.
I love that. That's a great takeaway.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for understanding the different levels of emotion at play in the workplace. But how do researchers actually measure these slippery things? It can't be as simple as taking someone's temperature, right?
It's definitely not that straightforward.
Yeah. I'm picturing a scientist with a moodometer,
Yeah.
like holding it up to people's faces all day long.
Yeah, it's not quite like that. And that's actually one of the limitations of some of the traditional methods,
Okay.
like surveys.
Okay.
Because while surveys can be useful for getting a general sense of things like job satisfaction,
Okay.
they don't really capture those subtle moment-to-moment shifts in emotions that we know are happening all the time.
It's like trying to understand the plot of a movie by only watching the trailer.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you get a glimpse, but you miss all the nuance.
You miss all the good stuff.
Yeah, and all the character development.
Absolutely. And that's where methods like experience sampling method, or ESM, which we talked about earlier,
Right.
come in. Remember those emotional snapshots?
Right, those little pings throughout the day where people are asked to report how they're feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah, that seems much more accurate to track those emotional ups and downs.
Yeah, ESM helps us understand not only what people are feeling,
Yeah.
but also what triggered those emotions, and then how those emotions, in turn, affect their behavior and performance.
Right.
So we get this much richer, more dynamic picture than we would from just a survey.
So ESM is like having that backstage pass to the emotional world of work.
I love that analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
We see all the costume changes,
Little
the
meltdown.
pep talks, yeah, all of it.
The doubt, the inspiration.
Absolutely, it's all happening.
But ESM is really giving us a glimpse into the behavioral side of things.
Right?
What about what's actually happening inside the brain
Yeah,
when
yes.
we experience these emotions?
So that's where neuroscience comes in.
Okay.
Specifically, tools like fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging.
Now we're getting really high tech.
Yeah.
So is this like actually being able to see which parts of the brain light up when someone's feeling stressed
Yeah.
versus when they're feeling excited?
That's exactly what it allows researchers to do.
Wow.
It's really pretty amazing. So by measuring blood flow in different areas of the brain,
Yeah.
we can get a sense of which areas are activated
Okay.
during different emotional experiences.
So instead of just relying on people to tell us how they feel,
Right.
we can actually see what's happening neurologically.
Exactly. And that can be really powerful for understanding the complexities of emotions.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key takeaways that have emerged from all these different approaches to measuring emotion at work?
Well, I think one of the most consistent findings is that emotions are really powerful drivers of behavior.
Okay.
No matter how you measure them, they influence our decision-making, our relationships with colleagues, our motivation levels, our performance.
So emotions aren't just these fluffy, intangible things we should ignore or try to suppress.
No.
They're a core part of how we show up and function in the workplace.
Absolutely. They're integral to the whole experience.
And I think that's something that we don't always acknowledge or appreciate.
I agree. I think sometimes we try to pretend they're not there.
Yeah, like we should just be robots.
Exactly, but that's not realistic.
And maybe not even desirable.
I agree.
Right. Because emotions can be really powerful.
They can, in a good way.
Yeah.
They fuel our creativity, our passion.
Our connection with other people.
Yeah, all of that.
So all this research is amazing for academics, but what about the average person?
Right.
Just trying to, ride the waves of their work life.
Yeah.
What are some practical takeaways?
That's the key question, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually use this information to improve our lives?
Exactly.
Well, I think one of the most important things is that managing emotions is a skill.
Okay.
You can learn it and develop it just like any other skill.
So you're saying we can train ourselves
Okay.
to be more aware of our emotions, understand them better, and regulate them more effectively.
Exactly. It takes practice,
Yeah.
but there are so many resources out there that can
All
help.
kind of resources.
Whether books, workshops, even apps now.
Really? Wow, technology's come a long way.
It really has.
Okay, so what are some concrete steps someone can take to boost their EQ, their emotional intelligence?
One of the most fundamental things is just pay attention to your emotions.
Okay.
Just start noticing how you feel throughout the day, you know?
Noticing without judgment.
Exactly.
Okay.
What triggers certain emotions? How do those emotions manifest in your body? How do they affect your behavior?
So it's about becoming a curious observer of your own inner world.
I love that, yeah.
And as we become more aware of our own emotions,
Yeah.
we start to see those patterns.
Exactly.
And we can get more control over how we respond.
You get it.
Okay, so what are some other practical tips?
Another really helpful practice is mindfulness.
Okay, mindfulness. I've heard of that.
It's about paying attention to the present moment
Right.
without judgment. And it can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths, focusing on the sensations of your breath,
Okay.
or noticing the sights and sounds and smells around you.
It's about hitting that pause button on the
Yes.
constant chatter of the mind.
Exactly. Grounding yourself in the here and now.
Okay. And mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress,
It has,
increase focus,
yeah,
help us regulate our emotions.
absolutely. It's like a superpower.
So it seems like a really valuable tool.
It is, for sure.
Okay, so we talked about individuals. What about for people in leadership positions?
Right. Because their emotions affect everyone else, too.
Exactly. So how can they use this knowledge to create a more positive work environment?
Well, one of the most powerful things leaders can do is model emotional intelligence themselves.
So leading by example.
Exactly. If they're open about their own emotions, if they
Yeah.
demonstrate empathy,
Yeah.
handle conflict constructively, it sets the tone for the whole team.
It's like giving everyone permission to be more human.
It really is. It creates this sense of safety and trust.
And it sounds like beyond just modeling emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
leaders can actually implement policies and practices that support well-being.
Absolutely. And there are so many ways to do this.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one simple but effective thing is just encouraging breaks throughout the day.
Breaks. Okay.
Yeah, we often push ourselves to work for hours on end.
I'm guilty of that.
But research shows that taking even short breaks can help us recharge, reduce stress, improve focus.
So instead of glorifying that always-on mentality,
Right.
it's about creating a culture where it's okay to step away.
Exactly, to prioritize your well-being.
Yeah.
And this can be especially important for people in jobs that require a lot of emotional labor, like customer service
Oh, yeah, for sure.
or healthcare workers.
Those jobs can be so draining.
They really can be.
So breaks are important.
They are, even little ones.
Okay, what are some other ways that leaders can support their team's emotional well-being?
Another important step is providing opportunities for professional development,
Okay.
specifically in the area of emotional intelligence.
Okay, so training.
Yeah, offering workshops on things like communication skills, conflict resolution, stress management.
So giving people those practical tools
Exactly.
to handle the emotional challenges of work.
Yeah, because we're not always taught these things.
No, we're not.
And it can make such a difference.
It makes sense.
And it doesn't all have to be formal training either.
Okay.
Leaders can also foster a culture of open communication,
Right.
where it's safe for employees to express how they're feeling,
Yeah.
to ask for help when they need it,
Yeah.
and get support from their colleagues.
That sounds like a really healthy work environment.
It does. It's about creating a space where people feel heard and understood and valued.
Not just for their technical skills,
Right.
but for who they are as people.
Exactly, for their whole
And it
selves.
sounds like when we create those kinds of emotionally intelligent workplaces,
Yeah,
everyone benefits.
everyone benefits. It's a win-win.
That's awesome. This is giving me so much to think about in terms of my own work life
You too?
and how I interact with my colleagues and how I manage my team.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Are there any other big picture takeaways that you think are important for people to grasp?
I think one really important theme that emerges from this research is that emotions are inherently social.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're not just something we experience internally.
Okay.
They're constantly being shaped by our interactions with others
Okay.
and the environment around us.
So we're not just isolated individuals battling our emotions alone.
No, we're all connected.
We're all in this together.
We are. We're all influencing each other.
That makes me think about that concept of emotional contagion again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we're all affecting each other's emotions, then it's even more important to create a positive and supportive environment.
And that's something that we can all contribute to,
We can.
regardless of our position.
Yeah, it's a collective effort.
Okay, so this has really opened my eyes to just how crucial emotions are at work.
Yeah.
But with all this talk about measuring them and managing them, isn't there a risk that things get a little too, I don't know, clinical?
That's a really important point to bring up. I think it's important to remember that while we can use these tools and techniques
Right.
to understand and manage emotions better, we don't want to create a workplace where people feel like they're constantly being monitored.
Right, like they're walking on eggshells.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Or like
she-
they can't be themselves.
Right.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance
Wow,
between acknowledging the importance of emotions
Yeah.
and creating a space where people feel safe and respected no matter how they're feeling.
So it's not about stifling emotions.
No, not at all.
It's about creating a workplace where people feel comfortable expressing themselves authentically.
Yes, within reasonable boundaries, of
Of
course.
course.
But yeah, authenticity is key.
So it sounds like it's about approaching this whole topic with a sense of curiosity
I love that.
and compassion.
Yes.
Being open to understanding our own emotions and those of others
Mm-hmm.
without judgment,
Without judgment.
without pressure to fix anything.
Exactly.
And I guess it's about recognizing that emotions are a natural part of being human.
They are. They make us who we are.
And when we embrace them,
Yes.
the good, the bad, the messy,
All of it.
we create a much richer and
Yeah.
more fulfilling work experience for everyone.
I agree. I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
So we talked about those emotional dialects and how they can lead to misunderstandings, especially in a diverse workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the potential pitfalls that can happen when we're not aware of those differences in emotional expression?
Well, I think one of the biggest risks is misinterpreting someone's intentions.
Okay.
Like you said earlier, mistaking excitement for anger
Right.
or not recognizing a subtle cue that has a completely different meaning in another culture.
Yeah. And those misinterpretations can lead to bigger problems, right?
They can damage relationships, create tension.
Hurt feeling.
Yeah, hurt feelings lead to missed opportunities.
Right. Because if we're not understanding each other on an emotional level,
Yeah.
it's hard to collaborate effectively.
Exactly. It erodes trust. And it can really hinder communication.
So it sounds like it's really important to be mindful of our own cultural biases
Absolutely.
and to approach those cross-cultural interactions with a lot of curiosity.
Yes, and humility.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just about being aware of those differences.
Right.
It's also about creating a workplace culture
Yeah,
where everyone feels comfortable expressing themselves.
absolutely.
Regardless
of their background.
Yeah, a place where people feel safe to be themselves.
Yes, and where those differences are seen as strengths.
Right, because they bring different perspectives.
I do. They enrich the team.
And different ways of approaching problems.
Absolutely. So it's about creating that sense of psychological safety
Okay.
where people feel like they belong.
Yeah, belonging is so important.
It is. It's fundamental to our well-being.
So if we want to create truly inclusive workplaces,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that people feel like they can bring their whole selves to work,
Their whole selves, exactly.
including their emotions.
Emotions, thoughts, ideas, the whole package.
Wow, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power of emotions in the workplace.
It's been a great conversation.
It really has, and I feel like we've covered so much ground.
Yeah, from those individual experiences
Yeah,
to the organizational level,
right, and everything in between.
we've talked about the science, the practical strategies, the ethical considerations.
It's been a whirlwind tour of the emotional landscape of work.
It has.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is
Mm.
there anything else you'd like to leave our listener with?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that emotions are not the enemy.
Okay.
They're not something to be feared or suppressed.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have that tendency.
We do,
Yeah.
but they're a valuable source of information
Okay.
and a powerful driver of human behavior.
So instead of viewing them as a weakness,
Yeah,
we need to see them as a source of strength,
absolutely.
insight, and even connection.
I love that, yeah, because when we're in touch with our emotions and we understand how they work, we can create workplaces that are not only productive,
Yeah.
but also more human, more fulfilling, and truly enjoyable.
And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day.
I think so too.
Well, this has been such a fascinating and enlightening conversation.
It really has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the power of emotions in the workplace, and that you feel inspired to keep exploring this fascinating topic. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, your emotions are a source of power, not a problem to be solved.
That's a great way to end it, and I love
Yeah.
it.